Ever since I was a kid, I loved playing video games. The quick hand-eye coordination, the thrill of passing new levels, and the nail-biting excitement and tension of all the obstacles and dangers was super fun. But what if the consequences of failure were real? And what if the ultimate consequence was the unthinkable? Well, I've realized that I've discovered just such a game. Flying an airplane in the clouds is the highest stakes video game I've ever played. In this video, I'll show you this crazy video game, why we play it, how it works, and the severe consequences for making mistakes. I fly my single-engine airplane all around the country on family and work adventures. And to help me fly in the clouds, I recently had a glass panel installed. It's basically a computer system that replaces the primary flight instruments, and it looks a lot like a video game. It has synthetic vision, which shows a digital version of terrain outside. The flight display is the screen, and the yoke is the joystick. Push the yoke and the rudder pedals, and the control surfaces of the airplane move and control the plane. And the changes of what the airplane is actually doing in real life show back up on the screen. Playing the game essentially flies the airplane. And it looks really familiar to flying video games I used to play as a kid, and a lot like flight simulators widely available for most computers now. The thing that makes this particular game kind of crazy is that the airplane is hurtling through the sky at 160 miles an hour, and the pilot can't see anything out the windows. It's like driving super fast in the thickest fog you've ever seen. Keeping control of the airplane becomes a major challenge, and losing control of the airplane or running into something ends in extreme consequences. But more on that near the end of this video. So why would anyone do this? Well, not every day is going to be a sunny Southern California day like we have here in Los Angeles. Even we get clouds sometimes, and people still want to go places when it's cloudy. So flying airplanes in the clouds has become an essential part of commercial travel and is a big part of general aviation too, and it can be done safely. I'll show you how.
Cherokee 631 Bravo Whiskey is cleared to Charlie Romeo Airport via Gorman, Victor 137 Avenal, as filed, climb maintain 10,000. Thank you.
Here's how it works. Instrument flight is when the visibility and weather conditions make it so you can't see out the windows of the airplane. So you have to rely completely on the flight instruments to fly the plane and navigate.
Down to 6,000, 1 Bravo Whiskey.
And it's possible to fly a really basic small airplane like mine built in the 1970s with this video game-like control, all the way from takeoff to right before landing, without even seeing anything out the window. You might be thinking, Eric, that sounds absolutely crazy. How is that even possible? And the first time I flew inside the clouds, I thought the same thing. I was shocked and amazed at how humans have figured out how to do this. Back in 1929, Jimmy Doolittle was the first pilot to fly blind from takeoff to landing with a hood over the cockpit. If it seems kind of insane to be doing it now with the modern equipment we have, just imagine almost 100 years ago. That guy really understood physics and science. He must have had balls of steel. Just a note, I'm not a flight instructor, just an instrument-rated private pilot that's a huge fan of how our aviation systems are designed. So none of this is instruction, but more of a fun overview. Before we jump into it, a quick word about the sponsor of this video. Hey, I'm super excited to be working with the sponsor of this video, Omaze, to offer you the chance to win $100,000 in cash, all while supporting a great cause, International Medical Corps. You can go to omaze.com/SoCalFlyingMonkey to enter for your chance to win. Omaze gives away amazing prizes and experiences, all while donating to various chosen charities all around the world. They take a sustainable approach to fundraising, and that means that nonprofits can spend less time and money raising funds and instead focus on serving the needs of their communities. The winner of this Omaze sweepstakes will win a life-changing $100,000 in cash. I know a lot of you may be browsing those trade-a-plane listings, daydreaming about an airplane, or maybe you just use the cash to pay off some debt or start a business. Donations support the amazing work of the International Medical Corps, who are providing urgent relief to the humanitarian crisis in the Ukraine. Teams in Ukraine and the surrounding region are expanding access to medical and mental health services for affected communities, helping refugees, and providing critical supplies, services, and programs at Ukrainian borders. Don't miss this opportunity for your chance to win $100,000 in cash. Go to omaze.com/SoCalFlyingMonkey. Don't forget, donations support the amazing work of the International Medical Corps. As pilots, we're basically trying to do three things: keep control of the airplane, don't hit anything, and land at a destination airport. In visual flying, what pilots refer to as VFR or visual flight rules, keeping control of the airplane isn't too difficult because you can see outside. Looking out the window makes it easy to fly by sight and feel, and we only need to occasionally reference the instruments.
Great, yeah, I'm going to make a right 360 and see the sights over here at 1 Bravo Whiskey.
Why not, Sam? That sounds good.
Many of our awesome trips have been VFR flying in good weather, with tons of amazing sights to see. But when you enter the clouds, it's an entirely different story. All of the visual cues that help you control the airplane are suddenly gone, and it's really easy to start experiencing spatial disorientation, which is when it feels like you're climbing, descending, or turning, when you may be doing the exact opposite. You just can't determine your true body position and attitude relative to the Earth, and your brain freezes and has difficulty processing the situation. I've personally experienced this feeling while flying in the clouds, and it is intense and arresting. Many pilots have lost their lives losing control of the airplane from spatial disorientation. More on that in a little bit. The remedy to this, they say, is trust your instruments. To keep control, we have to use only the flight instruments and try to overcome any seat-of-the-pants flying we've learned as visual pilots. To stay alive, we've got to really know the flight instruments, and there are 6 basic ones. The airspeed indicator that tells you how fast you're traveling through the air mass. The attitude indicator, which depicts the airplane's nose high or nose low and bank attitude. The altitude indicator, which indicates, you guessed it, your altitude. The slip skid indicator, which indicates if the airplane's nose is yawing in coordination with the bank of the plane. The directional gyro, or HSI, which is kind of like a compass and shows you the direction the airplane is pointing. And the vertical speed indicator, which shows you the rate at which you're climbing or descending. The mechanical versions of these instruments are sometimes referred to as steam gauges, even though they don't run off steam, but they are in essence very simple mechanical instruments based on air pressure or spinning gyroscopes. The pilot scans these instruments over and over and makes small adjustments to the controls.
Just a little right of course, and just a little high, but correcting.
With both the old steam gauges and the modern video game-like glass panel, we can successfully keep control of the airplane and make it climb, descend, or turn, and make sure we don't go too fast to where it breaks apart, or too slow where it falls out of the sky. That brings us to the second challenge. Don't hit anything. When we're flying visually, not hitting anything is pretty easy. We can see the mountains or other airplanes and avoid them.
Number 1 Bravo Whiskey, remain on the east side of the 405 freeway for our downwind.
Yeah, east side of the 405, that's where I'm at. I saw him, 1 Bravo Whiskey.
And navigating around with a map and landmarks isn't too complicated.
631 Bravo Whiskey, I've got that airport in sight there.
Bravo Whiskey, cleared visual approach, runway 12.
But when we can't see out the windows at all, it becomes much more difficult. So really clever people designed a really clever system, the IFR, or Instrument Flight Rules System. It's basically a series of charted airways and procedures designed to keep you clear of terrain and obstacles. They studied all of the terrain and came up with some complicated charts that show you where you can fly and what the minimum altitudes are.
We're already in an area where we could ask for lower, and on this particular section, and after Avenal, the MEA on this route is 8,000, and if we really wanted lower, we could take a different route. This GPS routes over here, which are 6,600.
And navigating onto these airways can be done in a couple really cool ways. The older way is using a navigation radio to tune into a VOR, which basically puts out a radio signal defining 360 degrees or radials of a circle. Tune the frequency, select the radial, and the needle shows if that spoke on the wheel is to your left or right, and if you're heading towards or away from the station.
Heading towards the Palmdale VOR, and I can see I'm a little bit right of course.
You can use the intersection of two radials from different stations to define your position. The modern way of navigating onto these airways is using precision GPS with digital maps. Some of them even have terrain alerting.
Caution, terrain, caution, terrain.
It's kind of like the GPS in your car, but much more expensive. So with either of these methods, we can fly along airways in the clouds and navigate to where we need to go without hitting mountains or other obstacles. But what about other planes? Well, the good people who work in air traffic control manage separating your plane from others by issuing clearances to fly these routes.
3621 Bravo Whiskey cleared to the Whiteman Airport. Fly heading 255. Expect vectors to the Van Nuys 255 radial, Jenna intersection, direct.
They use radar and some newer technology to identify other aircraft and keep planes away from each other, even when they're both inside the clouds.
1 Bravo Whiskey, turn right heading 070. Expect to turn back to the northwest here in just a moment.
Right heading 0701 Bravo Whiskey.
090.
Getting us out of the way of somebody.
So without seeing outside, we can control the airplane and not hit anything. But what about landing at an airport? Well, this is where it gets really cool. Some really smart people have studied the terrain and obstacles around thousands of airports and come up with procedures that can get the plane down right over the runway without hitting anything. These instrument approach procedures are fairly complicated and specific to each airport. They use either the older analog navigation radios or the more modern GPS method, but generally consist of flying to an initial approach fix and following a series of turns and descents. Many approaches have a glide slope that you can follow down to right over the runway. The approach course and glide slope are represented by needles. If the needle is to the right, you're too far to the left. If the glide slope needle is high, you're too low. Once the pilot is on the final approach, they just have to follow the needles down to the runway. You can fly in the clouds in a general aviation airplane all the way down to just 200 feet above the ground. But doing so can be really dangerous, and the consequences are severe. Before we get to that, if you want to see complete instrument flights and multi-view approach videos, become a SoCal Flying Monkey Patreon member, where we have an ongoing video series of multi-view, long-form, complete instrument approaches. We also have multi-part GoPro camera and editing tutorials, airplane maintenance video series, and loads of other bonus content. One incredible benefit is our really active private Discord chat just for Flying Monkey members, and we're planning meetups and flying trips. Come be a part of our awesome growing community. As I mentioned, flying in the clouds is dangerous and requires a lot of training and practice.
All right, I'm under the hood here. Okay.
Not just for initial certification, but to constantly stay sharp and proficient. Aviation researchers have done experiments with visual pilots not trained in instrument flying, simulating flying into the clouds. The average time from entering the clouds to losing control was just 178 seconds. I've personally experienced the sensation of spatial disorientation, and it's incredibly confusing. It can come on really quickly and make it hard to process anything that's going on. 76% of visual flights into instrument conditions result in fatalities. Like these airplanes whose pilots lost control in cloudy weather. The cost of failure is extremely high. But there's nothing like the views you see when flying in and out of the clouds. In between the cloud layers, or the feeling you get breaking out of the clouds over the runway and safely touching down, even in bad weather. Instrument flight demands you stay humble to the forces of nature, yet fly with confidence. Walking this tightrope is an incredible challenge that leads to lots of personal growth. The multitasking involved in controlling the airplane, talking to air traffic control, and navigating along routes and approaches make instrument flying the hardest and highest stakes video game I've ever played. but it's also the most fun and rewarding, making the hard work to stay proficient worth it. Thanks for coming along on the journey with me. And thanks again to Omaze for sponsoring this video. Enter to win that $100,000 at omaze.com/SoCalFlyingMonkey.